We are the hosts of the Creative Rebels podcast.
A podcast to help you find happiness and fulfillment in a creative career.
This series of videos we're calling Creative Thinking, and it's where we are going to be directly answering your questions.
If you're a freelancer, creative professional, or you're just getting started, we're here to help.
There's literally never been a better time in history to make a career from being creative. So many people are going to tell you that you can't do it, but we're here to tell you that you definitely can.
Welcome back, Rebels, to another episode of Creative Thinking.
Yes, and we are joined again this week by the Kitchen Club, and we are going to answer some of your questions. Hi guys, welcome back.
Hello.
I mean, you haven't left. But
We've just stayed right here.
it's fine.
It's been lovely.
So what's the next question?
The next question is very podcast related, so it's a good one. It is, when was the moment you decided to start a podcast, and how did you start with that?
So I want to ask you, when you came on our pod,
Yeah.
had you already had the idea of starting your own?
I think it was in the back of my mind, but Serena dragged me into it properly.
Kicking and screaming.
We were
Yeah.
both having the same idea, like not about Kitchen Club exactly, but we both wanted to do a podcast. But I think deep down we both knew that without the like joint motivation, we would actually never do it by ourselves. So I spent a while scanning the crowds, finding the right person, and then it clicked, and I was like, clearly Sarah's the best person to do it with.
It was actually because you listened to the episode of these guys, and you voice noted me and said, I've just listened to you on this great podcast and I really like your voice and I think you'd be really good to go on to do a podcast with.
You're welcome, guys.
Yeah, so if it wasn't for you guys.
That is true.
Yeah.
I had thought of it and I didn't know who to ask. And then I got talking to Sarah. She said, listen to yours. And it was great and I loved it. And then it was an obvious choice because we've got all the same interests and like we're talking about our like relationship.
Counselling.
The rest is history.
Yeah, so that's where that's where the firm idea came from. But I don't think I knew I wanted to do a podcast when I came to you guys. But I loved the idea of reaching more people in a different way, and I didn't know what that would be. But yeah.
It's such a good way to meet people. I think one thing we always say to people, because a lot of people reach out when they're thinking of starting a podcast, and we always say there's a wonderful book by Simon Sinek called Start With Why, and like you should start with why in everything that you do, but we specifically say it for the podcast, start with why. Like what are you trying to do? Are you trying to entertain people? Because we ask that question and a lot of times we get back like, oh yeah, I just thought it'd be kind of cool, and me and my friends have these really cool chats, so I thought we could put them out online. And
It's like, oh, Joe Rogan's allegedly making 100 million a year from podcasts, so I could go and make loads of money from it.
yeah, I think if money is your driver, then that's
never going to be successful, is it?
Yeah.
I have quite a big why for for why I wanted to do it. It's because I think I know I speak for myself, but I think I also speak for Serena that we're in a very big wellness bubble, and I know my friends and family and people I've grown up with who aren't in this industry, they don't know the things that we know, and it kind of we talk about really in a blasé way, and we assume that everyone knows them, but they don't actually know them. And it was also in educating them on my life and what goes on in my life, but also just educating them because it needs more education out of the bubble, out of the industry that we're in that isn't clearly not reaching the people that need to know about it. So it's stuff like talking about periods and talking about sex and all of these things that we've been talking about for years and are really quite comfortable with talking about, but there's still so many women our age who aren't. And I think it's weird when you see your friends and you kind of sound like a know-it-all if they're talking about something, you're like, well, of course that's the case. Of course the pill stops your periods, blah, blah, blah. But if you do it in a sort of educational way, we were like, here's this information for you. I'm not necessarily telling you.
It's not like you're forcing it upon them. It's like, here you go.
Yeah, like gifting them something to think about and go away and discuss with other people. And I think that's why I wanted to have that to share. And
nice as well, because if they learn something from it, at least they have the ability to then share it forward, and it's not getting saturated. It's not like Chinese whispers that kind of like gets useless as it goes along. At least they could just keep passing the podcast on, and that actual information is getting passed along rather than
Yeah.
their memory of the conversation.
And I think if no one's told you a thing, that's not your fault. Like if you haven't learnt about something, like you just didn't know about it, and that's fine, because there's lots of stuff I don't know about. And one thing about podcasting, I noticed this the other day. Like you and me now, when we were talking to Hillary the other day,
Yeah.
and we'll go, oh well, we learnt this in this episode because from this person. Like, I mean, I'm not saying that we went into the podcast like know-it-alls, but one of the things was like, oh, we know quite a lot of shit. We've been in business for 9 years. Like, we can probably help a bunch of people with this. And then, like, the amount that we've learned in the past, like,
Just from the podcast.
just from the podcast of different guests that we've had, and you have these conversations and you enlighten yourself and you help other people along the way. I think that's why I love podcasting.
That's kind of like the reason we started, was because people kept asking us questions of like, have you started this creative business? Like, what did you do to get there? And just asking for advice. And it got to a stage where David was spending so much time responding back to everyone in emails that we're like, well, this isn't scalable. How can we scale this? How can we, if someone's got a question, we can say, go and listen to episode 36, and then they can learn that from there. And what's really nice is we've had messages now where if we're doing question and answers like this, we'll put a thing out to our audience and be like, any questions? And then every now and again, someone will send something back being like, I haven't got any questions because you've answered them all. And I'm now on this journey of exactly where I need to go to. I found out what I needed to find out, which is great, because it's like, we're not there for, like, David kind of refers to it as like a course. It's like it could be one lesson, it could be 100. But at some point, it's going to give you the confidence to go out there and do something for yourself or help you in your journey in some way. I think like that is kind of like the reason why we do it.
That's really special that you got that response.
So nice. And I think when we started, we never expected it to be what it is now.
I think we called it Creative Rebels because creative people so often are looked at as the misfits and the people that don't fit in, and they feel really alone. And we just wanted to let people know that, like, yeah, there are actually thousands of you, like millions of you out there, but you've just got to find your people. And cause a lot of people get in touch and they're like, oh, thanks for letting me know that I'm not alone, and that there's other people worrying about the same things and are happy by and like get joy from the same things, and that's a lovely thing. What was the question? Because I want to make sure we're not deviating.
It was
too far.
when was the moment you decided to start a podcast, and how did you start?
Yeah, so I would think that whoever asked that is potentially thinking of starting their own podcast. So we'll start with why, which we've both
Yeah, I think the
gone
why is really
over our
important
why.
as well, because if you're starting a podcast with 0 listeners, 0 audience, then you're going to have to convince guests to come on this show, and having a strong why that they can believe in really helps you get guests.
Yes.
It's like when the first few emails we sent out, we were like, this is why we're doing it, this is what we believe, this is what we want to change, and we got a really positive response back. So like Emma Gannon was one of our first episodes, and she's huge, and that was a really great start for us, and that's because we had a strong why. If we were just doing it because we want to have Maseratis, then she would have said no.
And look, we've got Reggie H coming in this evening, and we met Reggie at an event, did a quick interview with him, and in the green room we just told him our why, and he was like, that sounds dope, I want to do an actual proper episode. And it's like, just by articulating why we're doing the podcast, he bought into the why, and he was like, yeah, I want to be a part of that, so let me do a proper episode. So yeah, just share your why with people, and even if you have no listens, because the average podcast lasts 7 episodes, because that's how long it takes before most people give up. And so when you ask a big guest, because I was talking about this to someone the other day, and she said, oh, I don't have a network that I'm starting podcasts. She was like, I was like, well, get big guests that will help you grow really quickly. And she said, I don't have a network to pull from. I was like, neither did we. Like, we started off with 0 listens. Everyone starts from 0, but you have to convince the person that you're speaking to that it's not going to be a waste of their time, that you're not going to be another one of those 7 episode podcasts, because there's thousands of them. It's like an elephant internet graveyard of just filled with these podcasts that people have started with all this, like, this is going to be amazing. And
It's a
like,
bit like the modern day blog, I suppose.
Yeah.
The amount of people who started blogs that have been 3 posts in and
Or
then...
YouTube channels or something?
Yeah. And it's a very human thing of having that excitement of new, and then when it's not new anymore, it's like, oh, if it's not,
It's actually hard work.
yeah. So articulating that why is really important. And also it's important to mention that the money will come. Like I think we've made, what have we made, about £14,000 so far?
About 15 grand.
Yeah. So and we've decided not to have any sponsors yet. Obviously, we could have made a lot more if we decided to go that route. That's just been from like speaking appearances and things like that. But that only comes because of we've got full-time jobs. Like that's not why we were doing it. That only comes because we've built an audience, because we're providing as much value as possible. And I think if we were going, how can we monetize this, we probably would have produced a different podcast that wouldn't have been as successful because we were thinking about the cash. So it's something to consider, and because I don't want to tell people there's no money in podcasting, because there definitely is, and you should get that paper, but but don't do it because of that.
I was actually reading a blog post on that yesterday about if you start a podcast for that reason, then don't bother, because it's so saturated and you might never get past the top 50% or whatever into that section. But so it's interesting.
Yeah, do it because you love it, because then it'll always be fun.
Yeah.
And so their question was like, how did you start? So did you do a lot of like YouTube tutorials on editing and all of that sort of stuff?
How did we
Sarah does all the editing, so I'm the wrong person to ask about that.
I spent a lot of time by myself in my living room watching YouTube tutorials and still not understanding anything. And I one day I thought I was just going to pull my hair out because I wasn't getting it, and I still don't think I've got it. But what were our first steps?
We had a lot of helpful people like you who recommended us microphones and software and
taking our photos.
All the stuff that we would have had no idea about. Because if you Google microphone on Amazon, of course there are hundreds, and you have no idea what's good. So I think a lot of it has been asking for help. And as we were saying earlier, people are really kind, and people do help you. And I think people, because everybody's been at the beginning, they're willing to help other people at the beginning because they know that it's a lot of work and it is a struggle, but because of that, it's also exciting. So I think a lot of, like, some of Piers' friends have helped you with the editing side and things, or are going to. I think a lot of the time just admitting that actually you don't know how to do something and it's okay to ask other people. And
so many people want to help and are happy to. And I also think we spent a lot of time thinking, oh, it will come. We'll start recording, or we'll start when this is done. But actually, just start. Our first episode was with Venetia Faulkner, the brilliant host of Talking Taste Buds. And we were so nervous. I was like full on shaking before pressing record, and she was like, guys, just start it, like stop it. And it felt like jumping off a cliff into water, like making this big leap. But once you're in, it's fine. You just got to sort of make that step, make that journey, and go for it.
And then each one we record seems to get easier and go more smoothly. The first one we hadn't realised, like, we're really bad at talking over each other, and we only had one microphone, so we couldn't turn anyone down. So there's times when it's three people talking at once and laughing, and like it was a great conversation, so it was interesting, but we're like, God, that's not good on the ears.
We're very giggly at first, aren't we?
So we're learning.
Yeah, it's all a process. Amazing. Well, I think that's answered that one. Yeah. Great. We hope you enjoyed that episode. If you have a question, just leave it in the comments below.
If you got any value from this episode, please leave it a thumbs up. And if you want to watch more content from us, please subscribe.
And if you know someone who might get value from this episode, please share it with them.
See ya.